G'day, I'm Matthew Cutler-Welsh, Education Manager for ProClimate New Zealand and ProClimate Australia. How best do we talk to people about Passive House? Well, talking is the easy part. What we actually want to do is communicate, and communicating is a whole bunch harder. This is how we talk to each other as Passive House professionals and as Passive House enthusiasts. And it's good because a lot of us are pretty even when it comes to the knowledge about the technical stuff. Most of you know what this is without even me introducing it. For those that don't, by the way, this is a example of Passive House planning package, which is an amazing spreadsheet that lets us accurately predict the performance of a building. But just think for a moment about the journey that you've taken to know what this slide means. How long has it been since the first time you heard those words, Passive House? And then you started to think about what that was. Maybe you spent some time pushing back against it for a while. Then you started to consider that things like airtightness might actually be a good thing in this part of the world as they are in other parts of the world. Then perhaps you started to seek out others more experienced in Passive House and started to talk to them and have conversations about this crazy new thing. And so on to the point today where you are a Passive House advocate. How long has that journey been for you? I know for me that it was a number of years to get from that very first introduction to the concept of Passive House, hearing it for the first time, really understanding it and getting to the point now where I've used PHPP, I know what PHPP does, and I know some of the ins and outs, and I'm a big advocate of it. We are still very much a minority in the general population. So it's really good for us to pause and think, what does everyone else hear when we say the words Passive House? There's so much noise out there, and there is always a difference between what you say and what gets heard. Believe me, I know this because I have 3 children. When we say Passive House, people hear anything from passive solar to eco-design to even solar power, who knows, electric vehicles, whatever, eco-living. We can choose to deny this, we can wish that it wasn't the case, but it's true, and believing it not to be true isn't going to help our cause. So accept it for what it is. Don't assume that what you've said is what gets heard, much less is what gets understood. As George Bernard Shaw famously said, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. So, how do we best talk about Passive House? Now, unfortunately, I don't have for you a silver bullet. In the same way that you as a designer don't have one single solution for every house that you design. It needs to be tweaked, but there are some really good underlying principles and a guiding framework that I hope will be helpful in having better communication with everyone about Passive House. The first part is to be positive. We want to avoid the negative and avoid talking about what Passive House is not. Secondly, we need to collect a diverse grab bag of topics, facts. Facts aren't all bad when we're communicating with other people, but it's also really important to embellish those with anecdotes and stories because it's all about telling a story. And finally, the importance of having empathy, which I'll go into a little bit more. So let's start with being positive. It's best to avoid talking in the negative. Now, as part of the Passive House Institute New Zealand board, we've actually done some training in public relations, and one of the key aspects there was to avoid myth busting because that focuses on things that aren't necessarily helpful, they're misconceptions. Now, whether that works for you or not, I think the underlying principle is a really useful one, to focus on the positive. And there is so much positive that we can focus on when it comes to Passive House. That's what's so great about it. One of those is well-being. Now, well-being might seem a little bit what my wife would call woo-woo. Doesn't seem very scientific. After all, what are the units that well-being is measured in? We love units. We're engineers, we're designers, we like the science. And yeah, that's how we communicate with each other. But remember, this isn't about us. It's about the people that we're communicating with. And for most people, being well, that is, happy and healthy, is way more important than being energy efficient. Another really good thing about Passive House is that it's a great way to build community. Now, Passive House builds community in a number of ways. One of the things that I've seen through listening to presentations at various conferences is the pride that it brings to builders who get to work on Passive House projects, who for a while have got sort of tired of building, but then get to work on a Passive House project and suddenly they're really, really proud again. It kind of brings them back to why they wanted to be a builder in the first place. Passive House buildings also make people proud of where they live. So if they get to the opportunity to live in a Passive House, there are lots of stories about reduced vandalism. People obviously want to stay there for longer, so they're going to respect the places if they're rentals. Very few people sell Passive Houses because they love them so much they don't want to move on. But aside from the building itself, Passive House buildings help build strong communities because of that sense of pride of where they belong. But also, if people are just healthier and better off, more connected to their environment, more connected to their neighbours, it's going to improve communities. And most people would want to live in a place that is safe, vibrant, and full of happy, healthy people. So building community, while that means a lot of different things to different people, generally there's something in there that most people can connect with as a really positive outcome of Passive House buildings. So that's two examples of being positive. Secondly, I want to talk about having that diverse grab bag of facts and figures and anecdotes, but also stories. And we need a grab bag. We need a collection of these because one size does not fit all. We can't just have one design of a house that's going to suit everyone. And we can't just have one story or one fact that's going to convince everyone that Passive House is a good idea. Because everyone is different. And this is where I guess things get a little bit hard. There's no shortcut here. True engagement requires connecting with different people in a different way. We're always going to have a different audience. So think about who you're presenting to and how you might need to reframe that information to make it relevant. Consider all these people. How would you talk differently to any one of these people? Most of us would, even by looking at someone, get a bit of an idea of some different language we might use, a different way that we would communicate with different people, and that's okay. We need to be able to do that. That's part of what being human is and interacting with people. So we need to adapt our stories and the stories that we tell relevant to the audience. So part of that is recognizing diversity, but also having a diverse range of stories that we can tell. Finally, we need to have empathy, and this is the emotional work. It is work, it takes energy. Empathy involves understanding how someone else is feeling at a particular time and responding appropriately to that feeling. Because not only are people different, but the same people can be different at different times. I've had cases when I change how I'm feeling from one moment to the next. So in this way, we're similar to water. Water is this amazing thing that exists in different states, sometimes in the same place at the same time. And it can change within a single day. It can even change within an hour or even a few minutes. And the same is true for us. How I'm feeling in the morning may be vastly different from how I'm feeling in the afternoon. I may go from being happy, open to new ideas, considering different options, to just being a complete disaster. So we need to be empathetic as well, not just of different people, but how those individual people are feeling and how responsive they are at different times of the day. One more thing. So we have a diverse set of stories and we're listening with empathy. By doing this, we are also able to respond to whatever's really most important for whoever we're talking with at any particular time. Now, comfort is a big issue. And as a podcast host, I've conducted over 200 interviews now with experienced architects, builders, consultants. And whenever I ask these people what is most important for their clients, comfort always comes out on top. And health is usually second. So comfort usually trumps health, followed by efficiency. And when people talk about efficiency, usually what they're actually talking about is money, because people don't necessarily want to be energy efficient. They just want to have the same outcome, but for it to cost less. And we know that this is true after having deep conversations with people, really getting at the heart of what really is important, even if in their first interaction they tell us that it's completely the opposite. So part of empathy and part of good listening is knowing what people are actually communicating, and it might be different, unfortunately, from what comes out of their mouth. Again, I refer to my children in this respect. So to sum up, my strategy for how to talk about Passive House is keep it positive. Don't dwell on the things that Passive House aren't or isn't. Think of the things that the great benefits that Passive House has. These will be different for different people, but have a think about all those great things with health, comfort, environmental outcomes, longevity, durability. There's just so many that it's not hard to come up with a whole bunch of really positive outcomes. Have a diverse range of stories and also facts, because different facts and different stories are going to resonate with different people at different times. And to understand those people and what is going on for them, which stories are going to resonate, empathy is really, really important. It's really good to understand how people are feeling at a particular moment, what's resonating with them, what do you think is going to resonate. Maybe the ability also to change tack if something's not quite working. And also with empathy comes the knowledge of when to perhaps walk away or when to just let things go, because there's no point in getting into a really big argument with some people. And look, some people just aren't ready or aren't going to be convinced, and we're better off putting energy into a more positive interaction. A couple of other practical tips now. I do want to recommend, if you haven't already joined in with one of the Passive House Accelerator happy hours, this is a really great community online, and they meet every week. It's sort of born out of everyone being in lockdown and the desire for people in the Passive House community to get together and network. Now, I do have an involvement with the Accelerator. I'm helping out with the Passive House podcast, so I should just make that clear. But in terms of engaging with people, the reason why I bring this up is because it's a great way to collect stories. It's also a really good way to find out how other people from around the world are having positive interactions with their clients, or even councils, policymakers. How are they having effective communication about Passive House? So I really recommend that. The time zone works out quite well for us here. If you don't mind taking an hour in the middle of the day on a Thursday at the moment, but jump in there, have a look around. Their videos are available after the fact, but it's great if you can jump online and be part of the networking activities as well. Over on the ProClimber website, we also have some really good resources. There's a projects page now on the ProClimber New Zealand website, and there will be a similar addition to this on the Australian website coming out soon. But again, this is a great place to find projects, and projects are really stories. So jump in there. This can be really useful to school up on what's going on for yourself, but also to send other people, send your clients, send colleagues to go and have a look. Now, not all these are passive houses, but they mostly have airtight membranes and are built to a higher level than just the building code. So they are useful in that respect, even if they're not all certified passive houses. If you are looking for a great collection of certified passive houses, then it's pretty hard to go past Jason Quinn's book of Passive Houses for New Zealand. And of course, look out for the Australian version of this book coming available soon. And that's a really great resource, again, for you to collect your own stories, but also to direct your clients and other people to get inspiration, because it's not just about the facts and figures in these books. They're full of beautiful photos, which real estate people like, and also some really nice descriptions of different types of projects. While we're speaking of books, make sure you, if you haven't already, grab a copy of Cara Rosemeyer's book, Positive Energy Homes. Again, really helpful for explaining some of the fundamentals of the building science, but also some of the stories behind why this stuff works. And there are loads more where these came from. Elron's got a great summary of reviews of really good passive house books on his website, so check out the blog of Elron Burrell. Of course, he's got some really good information there as well around the site, but there's also a great list of books that you can reference or direct other people to find out more. Then finally, the Passive House Institute New Zealand has got a great resource on this very topic on the passivehouse.nz website. Have a look in the resources download section, and there is a little PDF there that you can download, which is all about how to talk about passive house. One of the key points down the bottom of there is what I mentioned earlier about some people is just, it's not worth spending too much time on. So choose your fights, but keep it positive, and those supporters and the people who are persuadable are our key targets for who we want to have these conversations with and be talking about passive house. One final thought from me, this is one of my favourite quotes with regards to communication. It comes from Mark Horseman, who is a veteran podcaster at Manager Tools, and he's basically paraphrasing here the management guru Peter Drucker, who said, communication is what the listener does. Remember, it's not about us and about how we communicate with each other. The more important communication is the communication that we all do with the wider audience of the general public. Well, thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you've got something useful out of that. I'd love to carry on the conversation with you. If you have any thoughts, comments or questions, then please do get in touch. Thank you very much.